And tonight what we're talking about is how to create money-making virtual book tours from the comfort of your home with podcast appearances. Now, I know that's a long, drawn-out title, but it is a reality, and you can literally make millions of dollars from the comfort of your home. Will most people do that? No. Most people will not make anything, and here's a simple reason why. They don't do the work. If you do the work, you can make a very comfortable living by being an author, having information products, having services that you can provide to people, and getting on a lot of podcasts. And what I'm going to teach you tonight is the whole premise around podcasts, and then also podcast tours. Now, before I continue, by a nod of the head, and Luthi, I can see you, Jeanette, I can see you, Peg, I can see you. Just nod your head if you can hear me. Okay, perfect. I can continue on. Okay, who this training is for. Now, all of you, like I said, have invested in either the directory or you've done one-on-one training with me. You've been in my group training of the 100 Club. So you're more inclined to fall within this category here. But the first-time authors who want to learn a powerhouse way to market, that would definitely be who this is for. Seasoned authors who want to know how important visibility is, because even seasoned authors sometimes don't know how to get visibility. They're very good at writing books, but they have no clue how to get in front of their audience. So it's for seasoned authors, authors who want to relaunch a book. If you have a book that maybe you wrote 5 years ago and it's an evergreen book, and you really feel like you could relaunch that book because the information is timely. Like we have Twyla on the call who has a wonderful book called Fueling Change. And right now she's doing a few minor changes to it, and it's not major changes, they're minor changes to the book. And it's becoming a book that was a regional book now to a national and even international book. And with that, she could very successfully use podcast tours to launch that book. However, before you go off and start getting podcast opportunities, there's things I'm going to teach you tonight that you absolutely must do to have a successful campaign. Because oftentimes what people do is they want to do the fun stuff. I want to get on and I want to do interviews and I want to just talk to people. And I have people tell me all the time, oh, I can hold a conversation for hours. Well, that's not what a podcast interview is about. It's about creating value for the listener, creating value for the viewer. And if you do a blog tour with it, it's about creating value for the reader. And it's all about laying a foundation. So keep that in mind as we go through the content tonight. Experts who have books, products, and services they want to gain massive visibility for, and influencers who have an important message and mission. I can use, somebody is unmuted for some reason. Let me see that. I'm going to pause. Okay, and we're pretty laid back here. So don't, I'm not going to be real formal here. I'm just going to be myself. And what you're going to find when you do podcast interviews, the more you are yourself, the better you're going to do. Oftentimes people want to be perfect and they don't want to make any mistakes. And sometimes we make mistakes. And what I learned early on as a professional speaker, if you make a mistake, you don't have to apologize to the audience because 9 times out of 10, they have no clue that you made a mistake. So keep that in mind as you do podcast interviews. But if you have an important message and mission, and I'll use Peg as an example. She wrote a book called Scandal in the Shadows, and I'm going to be featuring the book in this presentation and show you a few things about it. But she actually is going to be blowing the roof off of the Catholic Church, basically. And she's a very devout Catholic, but she has some information that this book is going to reveal. And it's a very important message. It's a mission, and podcast tours are perfect for somebody like her. So if this describes you, could you put a yes in the chat box? Can you just go ahead and put a yes in there if this describes you, that you're one of those people, you're an author, and you should be able, okay, we're getting some yeses, yes, 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 okay, keep coming. I want to know that everybody fits that criteria. Perfect, perfect. Hey, Lois, good to see you and good talking to you yesterday. Excellent, excellent. Okay, perfect, perfect. Okay, so writing and publishing your book is the easy part. A lot of authors think that's the hard part. I got news for you. Now comes the visibility of you and your books. The writing really is the easy part. It's figuring out how do I get visibility. And truth be told, it's more competitive today than ever before. Back in the day when podcasts first became popular, and we're going back about 8 or 10 years ago, where people didn't even know what a podcast was. It was like when blogs first came on the horizon. People are like, what's a blog? What's a blog? And now everybody knows what a blog is. It's the same with a pod. Now, the greatest challenge with marketing and selling your books. I did a survey a while ago, and the answers that I got were 38% said knowledge is their greatest challenge, 33% said time, 17% said money, 7% said fear, and 5% said other. So these are some of the reasons people have a challenge with marketing and selling books. Authors rarely sustain themselves, and this is really important information. Very rarely is an author going to make a living by their writing alone. You have to think in terms of multiple streams of revenue. And some of the multiple streams of revenue would be books, speaking engagements, consulting, coaching, events, masterminds, online products. Those are all different ways that you as an author, in most cases, not always, but in probably 98% of the cases, you can find other ways to make money to supplement your income and enhance your income. Now, your job is to gain as much visibility for what you do as possible. Don't expect fame to fall from the heavens. Podcast interviews expose you to hundreds, sometimes even thousands of potential readers per episode, and the shelf life can't be beat. Now, this client is actually on the line, and if she wants to say something, you certainly can, but you have to unmute yourself and give us the amazing news about an episode that you were on that wasn't even in your wheelhouse of topic, but you managed to spin it into your wheelhouse and you got another interview. So Anna, go ahead.
That's me. Yeah. So I worked with Kathleen, and she introduced me to a radio host who does a show called Ready for Love. It's a great show, but it's not in my niche. My niche is how to live a spiritual life in our material world and live from your purpose and calling. But I had learned from Kathleen that you make it work. You find a way to bridge the two. And so I did. I spoke about my message a bit, connected it to my marriage and relationship, and connected that to spirituality and material living. So I just found a way to 10 questions that I sent her to be within her niche, but sharing my message. And a month after I did the show, so first she booked me for a second show on the power of intuition 3 days later. So that was the first thing that she did. And then the second thing was that she sent me a private message saying, I usually don't share my stats, but I usually get an average of 40 to 45,000 listeners per episode, and your episode reached 49,000 people. And my son went, no, you mean 4,900? I said, no, 49,000. So that's the story.
I love it. I love it. And, you know, when you start adding up the numbers, when you do a tour, and a tour, you're going to see what the actual numbers of how many you have to do to consider it a tour. One, it takes a lot of work. You know, a lot of people, I was talking to a client the other day, and his assistant was on the line, and they were both like, isn't there an easier way to do this? Can't we do it faster? And I said, yeah, you can throw a whole bunch of mud on the wall and hope something will stick, or you can have a very targeted approach, and that targeted approach reaps you much better conversions, if you will. And I'm going to talk tonight about, and for some of you it might be daytime, depending where in the world you are, but for most of you it's evening. But I'm going to talk about the foundation that you absolutely want to make sure is in place before you ever start going out and getting a lot of interviews. I'm working with several clients right now where we're actually cleaning up their processes to step back, have a 30,000 foot view and say, okay, if you want to end up over here doing high-end retreats and you're over here with a 100-person subscriber list, we have a distance to go before we get there. It can be done, and it can be done very rapidly, but you have to get certain pieces in place. So that's what we're really going to talk about tonight, and thank you for that, Anna. if you have a book and want to gain a lot of visibility, podcast interviews cannot be beat. It's the name of the game nowadays. In the past, it was blogging, it was article writing. I mean, you can go through the history of online marketing, and there have been periods where there were certain things that were really hot. Well, right now, podcasts are hot. There's video podcasts and there's audio podcasts. And I'm going to share with you the main platforms that you want to be looking at when you go out and look for opportunities. But a virtual book tour where you have a book that, and even if your book isn't published yet, you can get everything set up. But a virtual book tour will make you unstoppable when you have your foundation in place. Now, basically, what a virtual book tour is where you, the author, make appearances on blogs, social media, and podcast shows as the featured expert. Now, the beauty is, and you might want to take some notes on this because I don't have a slide on it, but I do want to share with you one strategy that you can use. When you're on a podcast show, you get what's called the permalink from the host. The permalink is the link to the direct episode that you did. Then what you can do is you can do a blog post around that episode. You can do a paragraph leading into, I did this interview with Kathleen Gage, and we talked about X, Y, and Z. You have the audio or the video, then you put a closing statement, and you say, to learn more about what I do, go here, or to get my free meditation, go here, or to get my free checklist on how to train your dog, go here. But basically what you're doing is you're getting double duty from that podcast show. Then what you also want to do is you want to make sure that you promote that podcast episode on all your social media channels. And I'll give you a list in a minute, not in a minute, but in a few minutes on where to post that information. So some of you don't know me. Most of you know me very well, but this is just a little bit about me. I was featured in this publication called Published, and that is a real magazine that I was in. I was on the front cover. I have a YouTube video podcast. I've done many, many, many speaking engagements. I've been a keynote speaker, a breakout speaker, a consultant at conferences. I've had my own 3-day events, and I am a plant-based eater. I'm actually growing that market, and everything I teach within the internet marketing space and with my clients, I'll be using as I grow my plant-based revenue stream. Two of my passions happen to be rescue animals. Every animal that you see on this page, except Kayla, which is the horse to the far right next to the goat. She was not a rescue, but every other animal here, including the runner down at the bottom, is a rescue. But no, I'm actually, my passion is I run, and for my 60th birthday, I did a marathon. For my 64th birthday, I did a triathlon, a sprint triathlon. And for my 65th birthday, I did a half marathon, and I'm trying to figure out what to do for my 66th birthday. And that's part of my branding. The reason I share it is sometimes I create opportunities as a result of sharing about the rescue animals and about my running passion. So whatever your passions are, don't hide them, because it's like being a TEDx speaker, for example. If you've done a TEDx talk, you want to share that with people. If you've been certified in a certain skill set, you want to let people know that. If you have a certain hobby, like maybe you climb the Himalayas, and that's hiking is a hobby of yours, incorporate that into your branding, because that will be what your unique selling proposition is. And actually, the little dog that you see with Rescued and Loved Forever, she's over the Rainbow Bridge now, but I actually did a fundraiser online for her. And as a result of doing that fundraiser, I was invited to speak at the largest animal blogger conference in the world. That opened up women in the pet industry. That opened up the Pet Services International Conference. Quite a few of my clients are in the pet space, and it was all because I did a fundraiser for a rescue dog. I had no intention of getting business out of it, but because I had a connection between what I was doing with my passion and what I do in business, it was a nice marriage. So I encourage you to really look at those things that you take for granted. You say, oh, I'm in theater and I'm in my mid-60s and I'm a lead in a local play. Oh, who wants to know about that? Well, people want to know about that because that's what makes you unique. So, give you a little background on my books. This was one of my very first books I published, Message of Hope. It was a inspirational thoughts book. And the first book signing I did ever was with this book. And at my first ever book signing, nobody showed up. Nobody. No friends, no family. The meeting planner showed up. And so it was she and I all day long. We're waiting for people to show up. This book never really made any money. How I made money with this particular book was actually I would do presentations and sell the book for $10 back of the room. And if I made $100 in a day, I was over the moon excited. So that was back in the day where I didn't understand the power of a good book launch. Fast forward 4 years, the law of achievement. That's back when I started doing Amazon campaigns, and that was back in the day when you got a whole bunch of joint venture partners and they would all help to promote it because they gave a bonus gift. And in its day, that worked really well. This particular book made number 4 overall, beating out Freakonomics, The World is Flat, The Da Vinci Code, and several other very popular books during a period of time. It was number 4 overall, not in a category, overall. We sold in a 24-hour period, I think it was $23,000 worth. That $23,000 was a springboard into some consulting from somebody who had bought the book and said, I want you to teach me how to do a launch. And I said, oh, I don't teach other people. Scared the heck out of me because it was like, oh, I can do it for myself, but I certainly can't do it for somebody else. And I threw out a number because she kept insisting. And well, first what I did is when I had the success of this launch, I did a one-day workshop in Salt Lake City. That's where I lived at the time. And I think I charged $149 back in 2006. And so now it'd be like $300 or $400, no big deal. And I had, I think, 30 seats available. And I said, okay, I'm going to do 30 seats. I'm going to put a message out to my market. I had a small mailing list at the time. And within a day or two, it sold out. And I'm like, wow, this is great. So I made $4,500 that way. The room was sponsored. You know, there was no real expense to it. Well, out of that, I had this woman who insisted that I do her launch for her. And I said, no, I don't do launches. And she was very insistent. And so I gave her a number of what I would charge and had no idea what to charge. But I believe I said $10,000. And she goes, okay, how much of a deposit do you want? And I'm like, oh, darn. I really didn't want a deposit because it meant that maybe it was by a fluke that I hit number 4 overall. Maybe it was a fluke that I was successful with this launch. Could I replicate that? Well, not only did we replicate it, I started doing campaigns for other people that, and if you know who Christine Closure is, at one point I was her marketing director for the Freedom Formula when that book came out. Then I started getting more and more clients who wanted to learn how to do it. Then I did an information product. And then in 2013, this was the big book that really put me on the map with how to use a book for a springboard into a 3-day event, back-end consulting. And I had hired a very high-priced consultant to work with me on the event side of things and work with me on how to package my content in a way that it was very sellable. So let me show you the numbers here. In 2002, no profit. In 2006, it was about a 50,000 plus profit. In 2013, the event generated $250,000, and since that time, it's generated over $1 million. And I actually had to check with my sweetie on this because she keeps me in line with, you know, am I telling the truth or am I embellishing the truth? And I said, how much would you say that we've made from that one event? And it led into all this other business. She goes, oh, easily $1 million. And I'm like, okay, I can give that number because I don't know about you, but as speakers, sometimes we do tend to say things and we start believing our own press. And that's one thing you don't want to do as you're doing podcast shows. Don't believe your own press. Don't think that you're all that. Don't think that it's okay to be arrogant. Because, and I don't think anybody in my community would do that, but I've seen people do that where they start showing up late for interviews. They're not prepared for the interview. They haven't tested their equipment. All of that will work against you if you're trying to get podcast interviews because it's a really small community and people know each other. This is basically what the whole lead-in was. I had the book. We sold tickets to event. Basically, the people who got the book got 2 tickets to the event. They put a refundable deposit down, which meant they were going to show up to get their deposit. I had a product that I sold at the event for the price of the deposit, so I was able to get most of the deposit back. That was about $20,000 that I wrote checks for, and I wanted to get that money back. And then what I did is I actually made an offer to the audience of a very high-end consulting package. And at this particular event, I think it was about a $15,000 package. And then at the next event, it was about $29,000. So just kind of giving you an idea of what you can do. Now, people go, oh, you're so lucky that you did that. There was a lot of work that went into this. There were days that I would wake up going, what have I done? Is this going to be successful? I don't know. And I would call my coach, and my coach would literally talk me off the ledge, not walk me off the ledge, but talk me off the ledge. Because the bigger you play, the more anxiety you can have unless you have all your ducks in a row and you have a team in your corner who's there to fully support your ambition and your goals. Okay, so this is one client, Lana from Montana. We call her Lana from Montana because it's not Lana, it's Lana. And this is her book, The Food Codes. Now, one of the things about writing a book and when you're going to be on shows is it's a really good idea to send a physical copy to the host. And the reason being is if I'm interviewing somebody and they've sent me a copy of their book, I can actually pull up the book and I can say, well, you know, I was reading on page 88 about muscle testing. Let's talk more about muscle testing. Well, right there, I've promoted Lana's book. She can talk about her book and she can say, oh yeah, it's available on Amazon. Real low key sale. Okay, so that's what you want to look at. She actually went through the 100 Club and she's been crushing it. She actually has a goal of 100 podcast shows. She's at about 35 right now, and she started a few months ago. She was one of my most resistant clients of getting on podcast shows. She goes, do you think this is really going to work? Do you think I really should be on podcast shows? And I'm like, okay, we're gonna walk you through this. Yes, I think you should be. The first one she did, it was like a drug tour. She goes, oh my gosh, that was so exciting. I want to do more. I want to do more. And the host absolutely loved her. There's a few reasons. One reason is she's very prepared. 2 is she's very gracious to the host. 3, she always sends a physical copy of the book. She'll ask them, would you like a physical copy of the book or would you like a PDF? Most of them ask for a physical copy. She signs the book to them and she personally mails it out. She doesn't send it from Amazon. She actually has a stack of books where she'll sign it to them and she personalizes it to them. And she has gotten invited back on many of the shows that she's been on. And the beauty also is many of the hosts have given her the name of other hosts. So because she's such a good guest, it has become relatively easy to get her on shows. And she's got a great topic. I mean, she knows her topic inside out. Here is what's called a pitch sheet. Everybody should have a pitch sheet. As you'll notice, it's very simple, very short bio, topics that she can be interviewed on, and her website. That's basically it for a simple pitch sheet. It also has links that are active links because this is a PDF that she has on her website, but these are active links to her social media channels. One of the things that some hosts are looking for is they are looking for your social media presence. They want to know if you have a presence. And one of the things that works in your favor with a host is when they say they're going to have you on the show or you're trying to pitch them, you're asking to be on the show, is to say, I also promote the episode. I love promoting episodes I'm on. They really appreciate that because then they're not doing all the work. If you can really show them that it's going to be added value for you to be on the show, that really works in your favor. The fact is, most books make less than $100 per year, and some in the lifetime of the book. This comes from John Kramer, who is the author of 1001 Ways to Market Your Book. John has re-released this book. It's probably in its 5th or 6th version. And I met John probably about 10 years ago at a book conference, and he's a great guy. He's a wonderful guy. If you don't have his book, I highly recommend you get 1001 Ways to Market Your Book. You probably won't use all 1001 Ways, but you might get some ideas that, maybe there's 20 in there that will be very beneficial to you. It's just like the directory. I've had some people who, before they buy it, they go, are all 500 going to work for me? And I say, absolutely not. If you get 10% from the directory that work for you, that's a home run, because if you've ever looked for shows, you know that it can take time to really find those customized shows that you're going to approach. And if you've not dug into the directory, my question would be why? Because it's a great directory. We put a lot of effort into that. The shows are current. We do everything possible not to list shows that charge you. This is another thing. Please make a note of this. You shouldn't have to pay to be on shows. There are plenty of people that will have experts on without making you pay. There are some hosts, they must have gone through a training where somebody said, here's a way that you can make money at your podcasting. You get people excited, you say you want them on your show, you say they're the perfect guest, and then you say, oh, and it's only going to cost you $500. And there are people paying that, and it's like, no. Because they say, what we're going to do is we're going to promote it via the social media channels. We're going to put a link on our website. We're going to give you the link to the show. We're going to give you the replay of the show. You get all that anyway. And there are plenty of shows that will have you on at no cost. However, you want to create value for the host. And the more you can do that, the better off you're going to be. So why podcast shows? One is visibility, market reach. And if you have questions, be sure to put them in the chat room, because I will be answering questions later. And again, as I mentioned before, some of you came on, I'm not selling anything tonight at all. So don't be waiting and holding your breath for, when are you going to have to pull out your credit card? You won't. What I will do is give people the opportunity to fill out an assessment to see if it makes sense for us to hop on the phone to talk about me working with you long term. But as far as having a buy button tonight, there is no such thing tonight. Fast track your success. The more shows you're on, the quicker you're going to get visible. And if you have all your back end in order, then you're going to have much more success. Low marketing costs. It showcases your expertise and your book. I've got this book by Marsha Moran, she tells the story of how it would take her early on after her stroke as much as a day to write 2 paragraphs. And it took her 4 years to write this book. She was so committed to getting the message out. And so part of what her message is, if she goes on an author show, is her message is don't give up. Be persistent. It's going to be painful at times. It's going to hurt at times. It's going to be long at times. But if you stick with it, you end up with a very successful book. She was just featured on the website of ABC News because of her book, because of her persistence. And when people tell me, who are fully functioning human beings, and they say, I can't get my book done, I want to refer them over to Marsha to have a conversation with her, because if somebody who had a stroke, who was paralyzed on her right side of her body, couldn't talk, couldn't walk for a year, and ended up having a highly successful bestseller campaign, I would say virtually anybody can do it if they're committed. So it's a great way to showcase your expertise in your book. It often leads listeners heading right over to Amazon. You want to make sure that your Amazon page is visitor ready. You want to make sure that your website is visitor ready, and I'm going to be talking about that. And again, please put your questions in the chat room, and I will be looking at those, and I'll open up the lines also. And podcast shows, without a doubt, are great for raising awareness of your book. Lana says every time she is on a podcast show, her book, The Food Code, sells a few copies. Now, 2 or 3 copies in a month, if you're on one show a month, that's not a big deal. But imagine if you did a virtual tour and you said, okay, for 2 weeks, I'm going to focus on nothing but doing as many podcast shows as possible within that time period. Now, many of them are pre-recorded, but if in a 2-week period, you had 50 to 100 shows that were aired during that time period with the launch of your book, do you think that you would probably sell a lot of books? Absolutely. And the more people hear your name, and the more they hear you on one show and then another show and then another show, you have people that become fans. That's the reality of podcast shows. And if you can hold a conversation, Okay, somebody is not muted. If you could mute yourself, thank you. Okay, why a virtual tour? Well, a virtual tour gives you, the expert, unbelievable reach in a very short period of time, and hosts are constantly on the lookout for engaging guests. Shows are often very niche. So that's the thing you want to look at. What types of shows do you want to get on, and find the niche that you can basically take over. The audience for podcasts are skyrocketing, and shows, there's no sign of them stopping. And it's a very cost effective way with a high return of investment. Now, we've gone through a lot of this. This is basically what the training is, and it's not about you starting a show. You know, I have people say, can you help me start a show? And it's like, I don't want to. That's not my wheelhouse. That's not my sweet spot. My sweet spot is preparing people to do rock solid interviews, and really use those interviews as a way to springboard into other things that you do. With the trifecta power of a virtual tour, you have a three-prong approach and three-prong benefit. One is to the host. So if you're a really good interviewer or interviewee, and you're engaging and you're comfortable, it benefits the host because they look good. It benefits you, the author, and it benefits the listener for you to bring value. When you're on a podcast show, that's not the time to be selling stuff. You're not there to sell anything. You're there to create value. The more value you create, the more likely it is somebody will go to your website, somebody will check you out on social media, somebody will check out your Amazon page. And, you know, think of your own listening habits around podcast shows. And it's amazing how many people say, I want to get on podcast shows, and I ask them, what shows do you currently listen to? And they go, I don't. And that's the first piece of homework, is start listening to shows, because you want to listen to the host. You want to listen to how they interview their guests, how good their guests were. If you find guests that are in a similar genre as you, start following them, find out what other shows they've been on, because it might be likely that that would be a good show for you to be on. So if you're currently not listening to podcast shows, I highly recommend that you do. One of my favorite podcast shows is Rich Roll, who is a plant-based eater. I love his podcast show. Lewis Howes is another one. I really like his podcast show. Mel Robbins is one. I really like her podcast show. And currently I have my YouTube channel. I'm in the process of partnering with somebody, and we're going to be starting a plant-based podcast show. And I have people who say, well, can I be on your show? And it's, are you plant-based? No, you can't be on my show. So that's how much of a stickler many hosts are. If you don't fit their criteria in some way, shape, or form, they probably won't have you on the show. So you want to look for as many hooks and angles that really are in alignment with, okay. Now, a lot of people do advertising to get their message out there, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with advertising if your advertising is more than just sending messages out to market, but you have a strategy behind it. But some of the push advertising is Facebook ads. With Facebook ads, it's best to start with determining who you're really putting those Facebook ads in front of. If you're boosting ads on Facebook because Facebook says for just $5 more, you can reach 2,000 people, don't do that, because you're basically throwing money away. If you have a strategy behind your Facebook ads, then it can be a very good idea. Amazon ads is another way. Email marketing is push marketing. Anything that's in your face to buy a thing is part of push advertising. Pull advertising is articles, like there's self-growth, there's eZine articles, there's articledirectory.com. There's a lot of article directories that you can put your articles on. You can also write for specific publications I'm trying to think of some of the publications online that are really popular. There's WebMD that always looks for qualified people to write for them, and they pay people to do this. But articles are a good way to promote what you're doing. Social media, obviously, is a good way to promote. Summits, where you're a featured expert on a summit. Radio and podcast interviews, and basically what you're doing is inviting potential readers and buyers to come into your community with what you're doing with pull advertising. So let's go into more of a podcast tour defined. It's when you book several shows within a short time frame with the specific purpose of raising awareness around a book, a cause, a movement, or another important issue. The most popular platform for podcasts is iTunes. Yet there are plenty of other platforms that people listen to, and many hosts, like if they're on iTunes, they use a service. It might be something like Libsyn is the name of the service, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but basically, if I can try to break it down, it's like an RSS feed. It's like a syndication where once you upload the episode, or they upload the episode to Libsyn or a service provider like that, it shoots it out to a number of different locations like Spotify, iTunes, Google. I don't even know all the places it goes, but that's a way that podcast shows get more traction. That's why podcast shows are so valuable, because it's not just going to be on the one platform that they're promoting it on. Some of the other platforms that you can do podcast tours, Facebook Live, other lives on social media platforms, Instagram, YouTube, obviously, Twitter. You know, every platform is starting to go live. Spotify is one, Blog Talk Radio is another, YouTube is another. These are all places you can search out opportunities. Stitcher is another. And with this platform, Libsyn, where a host will have this uploaded, and most hosts that are really doing a great job with their podcasting, they have a podcast manager that handles all those details. More and more every day, hosts are not doing the work themselves because it's very time consuming. So that's why they're pretty particular about who they have on their show. They want to make sure that the show is going to draw people in, because for every show they do, they not only pay for the platform, they're paying for the support team. It's their time, it's their audience, and if they don't have guests that are good, their audience, they can lose their audience. Podcasts are on the increase. Here's a few stats that, for those of you who like stats, 94% of podcast listeners are active on social media, and the national average of people being active is 81%. 52% of podcast listeners follow brands and companies on social media. So you have brand loyal people, which means if they like you, they're going to be you loyal. And I don't know about you, but when I find somebody I really like, I want to consume every bit of information that they have. I went through that with Hal Elrod. I went through that with Lisa Nichols. I went through that with Mel Robbins. I went through that with Rich Roll. I went through that with James Clear is the current person. Eric Thomas is somebody, but I just couldn't stand how much he boasted he was the #1 motivational speaker in the world, and he really wasn't. And so it was like, okay, I'm tired of you. And so you have to keep in mind what your audience likes and what they don't like. And just because I don't like him doesn't mean millions of other people don't like him. But people tend to be loyal who follow podcasts. They have more disposable income. So if you're wanting to make a living as an author through your consulting, through your speaking engagements, through your coaching, through your masterminds, through your books, podcast listeners have more disposable income. Podcast users' obsession with social media make them an incredibly valuable, highly sought after target audience possessing incredible raving fan potential. The economics of podcasting according to SmartAsset. Many podcast listeners have household incomes of $100,000 or more. 62% of podcast listeners have incomes of $50,000 or more. 58% of listeners have a bachelor's of art degree or a BA. Listeners become fans of shows and guests. Fans buy stuff. You might want to write that one down. Fans buy stuff. We like that. So finding opportunities. Here's some of the locations. One is iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, Google Search, Radio Guest List, and I'll leave this up so you can write it down if you want to. Podit is a fairly new platform. I'm a member of Podit. They have a free version on up to I think it's $39 a month platinum version. I'm in the platinum version. And it's a place where hosts and featured experts, they can meet. Another platform that is actually, I just found this today on LinkedIn, Spot a Guest, and it looks like it could be a good platform. So I would recommend that you check out iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, Google, Radio Guest List, Podit.com, and spotaguest.com. And with both Podit and Spot a Guest, you can join at the free level and become active. Work on your profile, make sure it's an engaging profile, make sure you have a good high-resolution picture. If you have a book, you have a high-resolution book cover. All of those are very essential to your success on shows. And then LinkedIn, you can check profiles of experts, and you can actually do a search with the word podcast host in there or podcast show, and you'll probably have quite a few profiles come up, and then you just do your research. Again, avoid doing a throw a bunch of mud at the wall kind of approach and really customize your approach, because the more customized you are, the higher your conversion rate. To hit it out of the park. Now, this is with a book launch and a podcast tour. Plan months ahead. Don't expect that you're going to start today and next week you're going to be on 50 shows. It's not going to happen like that. It can take months to get on a show, because the more visible shows tend to book out months ahead. They actually will have you fill out an application in some case. Some require that you have a certain type of equipment. Some require you absolutely must have a headset. If you don't, they will not let you on the air. I mean, there's a number of things that the more skilled and successful hosts will require of you. And it can take months to get interviews. Right now, a lot of hosts are saying, contact me after the first of the year, because with the holidays coming up, they're just trying to close out year end. Align your tour with a rock-solid book launch. So something you might want to do is look at, okay, when is my book going to be published? I want to put a launch together, and I want to tie my tour in with my book launch. You will be unbeatable if you do that. Make sure your foundation is in place, and I'm going to talk more about foundation. Look for 50 to 100 shows to be featured on, and realize it does take work. Again, anybody who tells you this doesn't take work, I would highly recommend you not listen to them, because I'm here to tell you, I've made a really good living in my business, but I've also worked very hard for it. And I have people say, oh, you're so lucky. And it's like, well, you know, luck doesn't have that much to do with it. Hard work really does. So be sure that you realize it does take work. Here's another client who did, she's rocking it with podcast shows, Selena Maitreya, and she went through the 100 Club. I've worked with her on many, many different levels. We actually did a summit launch a few years ago. She built her list by 5,000 within the photography industry, because it was very strategic. On the back end, made substantial revenues, and still to this day, with that summit, can track money back to what we did about 6-7 years ago. But she followed the strategy, started getting bookings on shows, and she said it was just a sweet, sweet formula. At this time, I was doing a group mastermind. I'm no longer offering that mastermind, but these are just some of the results that people got from a group training. Now, mistakes that people make. One is not being prepared. And the big, big, big thing with preparation, and some of you on this call know who I'm talking about, because you know, we've already tested this out. Do not show up late for your interview. Do not fumble with your equipment once you get on the phone. You test all of that ahead of time, so once you get on the line, you are good to go. I had a situation one time where I seriously thought the host was going to pre-record it, and we were going to have some chit-chat ahead of time, because for some reason I just assumed it was going to be pre-recorded. He dials into my phone. I pick up the phone. I said, hey, how are you, Mark? And he goes, great, Kathleen. And I'm on the air with Kathleen Gage. We're live from blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, shoot, we were live. So I had to just hit the ground running. I couldn't sit there and go, what am I going to do? I had to just step up to the plate. So it's because I'm prepared. It's because I've done hundreds of interviews. And so if you feel yourself getting a little frightened from all this, Just step into that fear. And once you start doing it, it becomes easier and easier. No media information, which means your expert one sheet, your pitch sheet, your media page on your website, you need that. No media page, mention that. Inexperienced at interviews. The only way you get experience is to do it, do it, do it, do it, do it. Not getting started. That's a big mistake that a lot of people make. The foundation. Okay, here comes the fun stuff. How you lay a foundation. And if at any point anybody needs a restroom break, just turn off your video, go do what you need to do, get some water, because we still have a lot of information to cover. I told you this was going to be very content driven, and I wasn't lying. I wanted to make sure I gave you a lot of good content tonight. Determine your long game. In other words, if you're doing a book launch, what do you want that book to do for you over the long haul? People say, well, I want it to be a bestseller. Great. Why do you want it to be a bestseller? Well, it'll make my family happy. Great. If that's the only thing, fantastic. That's going to be an easy outcome to get. If, on the other hand, your long game is you want to fill up high-end retreats, if on the long game you want to fill up your private coaching practice, if on the long game you want to get speaking engagements that you get paid $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 for an engagement, all of that is possible with the right planning. But you have to look at where you're at and where you want to be and how big is that gap. If it's a huge gap, you've got to start working right now on those little pieces that get you to the long game. Enticing offer to encourage people to opt in. One offer may not work where a year ago it worked. You might have to try 3 or 4 or 5 different offers. What we're doing is we're stripping down a lot of offers on my website, and the only thing that people will find is anything to do with podcast interviews and being a podcast guest. We're getting rid of all the Amazon bestseller stuff. We're getting rid of all the internet marketing stuff. It's all targeted around podcast stuff. Now, I've got one thing that's a checklist with a training video. That's one way I bring them in. Next is going to be a Kindle book that I'm putting together that I'm going to do the KDP campaign around, and I'm going to be giving it away for free. I'm going to price it at a point where it'll be easy for people to say yes. It's all about podcast virtual book tours. They get the book inside the book, and this is something for authors that I really encourage you to look at. Do you have what's called lead bait inside of your book? Because when you sell your books on Amazon, it'd be great if we could get the list from Amazon on who bought our book, but Amazon's not going to give us that list. So you have to figure out ways to bring people back to your website to opt in for something. It can be during your launch, where you say, when you buy the book, come back to this page, fill out the information, you'll get these amazing bonuses, whatever they may be. It could be a one-on-one call with you. It could be an event that you're hosting. It could be any number of things. The days of having dozens upon dozens upon dozens of giveaways, it's not as effective as it used to be. I'm not saying that it's not effective, but it's not as effective. But inside the book, you should also have ways for people to see that they can go back to your website and opt in for something. So have a number of ways that you get people on your list. Set up conversion funnels. Conversion funnels basically are you bring people into your list, you engage them with high value messaging, you make offers along the way, and that's basically you're converting them from lookers to buyers. Have all information handy that the host may ask for, which they're going to ask for your introduction. They're going to ask for a high resolution picture of you. They're going to ask for a book cover if you're an author. They may ask for a copy of the book. They may ask for your pitch sheet. There's any number of things they can ask for, so you want to have all that ready. Set up a nice media page on your website that you can continue to add to as you're on shows. Start with smaller shows and grow from there. I had somebody say, well, how do I get on NPR? And I said, you become NPR worthy, which means you get on a lot of shows, you get really good at what you're doing, people hear you, and they start requesting you on the bigger shows like that. Stay organized. Test your equipment before you're scheduled to appear. I want to emphasize this many times because it's very important. Never make a host wait. Here's a one sheet that I use. This is one side of my one sheet, and I have this on my website where it has Watch Kathleen in Action. That's a live link to what is called a sizzle reel for a speaker. It's a 2.5-minute video of me doing presentations. I'm not training anybody on anything. I'm just showing that I know what I do, what I can do on the platform. So you want to have your pitch sheet, and if you're going to look for speaking opportunities, you should have an expert one sheet also. So some of the specifics. Research target relevant podcast shows. That takes work. I would say for any of you that have not dug into the directory, I highly encourage you to do so. If you do run across shows that are charging, please let us know, because we want to take them out of the next version of the directory. We don't want people in there that are charging, and there are people starting to do the bait and switch thing, and that's really irritating. So let us know. Are the shows current? Look at when their last episode aired, how frequently they put episodes up, because if they haven't aired a show in 2 or 3 years, there's no point even approaching them because they're not active. Do they have guests on their show? This is a big frustration with a lot of hosts. I do a segment on my YouTube channel, What a Host Wants, and I interview show hosts, and I say, what's your #1 irritation? And they say, well, during the time when I wasn't taking guests on my show, I'd have people approach me and say, I'd be a great guest for your show. And it's like, I don't take guests on my show, but I'd still be a great guest for your show. If they don't take a guest, they don't take a guest. Don't approach them. You might approach them to build a collaborative relationship, but as far as trying to get on their show, if they don't have a guest, don't have it. If they only have women on their show, then you need to know that. If they only have let's say it's a show about LGBTQ issues, and they prefer to only have people from the LGBTQ community, well, then you've got to respect that. So whatever their preference is, that's what you have to respect. How frequently do they air? If they air once a month, you're going to have a much harder time getting on the show than if they air weekly or daily. There are some people Joe Rogan, for example, he airs daily, and a lot of people want to get on his show. And my first question is why? Because he's really harsh as a host, and he's kind of a shock jock. And usually the people he has on, he either loves them and they're like bros and they're BFFs, or he eats them up and spits them out alive. Bottom line. And next is, are they too big or do you need to grow into them? So if it's a really big show and you're not ready for that show, that's okay. Plan to be on that show. Get on the radar of the host. The way to get on the radar of the host is to follow them on Twitter, follow them on LinkedIn, join their Facebook groups if it's open to the public, and start posting. And just like with Lewis Howes, I want to get on his show, and I joint ventured with Lewis about 10 years ago. So he knows who I am, but I'm not at the point right now that he would want me on his show. He takes a lot of athletes on his shows. And so what I'm doing is every time I post and he says something about, what's something you're grateful for? And I said that I'm a 60-something woman and I'm out running marathons. I just love that because that's his sweet spot. So it's going to get noticed by him. I repost his stuff. I want to be on his radar. Another person who I do that with is Areva Martin. She wrote a book, Make It Rain, and she is a civil rights attorney. She also speaks on issues with autism, parents of kids with autism, and she also is a marketing whiz. I follow her. I retweet her stuff. I'm on her radar. So you can get on somebody's radar by following them on Twitter. Do you have your foundation in place? And again, the foundation is your website, your opt-in, your conversion funnels, things of that nature. What you need is you research. You need to know the show title. You need to know the genre of the show, the website address, the name of the host's email, recent guests that have been on the show, and the date of the last episode. And it's really important to keep very accurate notes. So whatever your formula is for keeping notes, it could be a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. It could be, maybe you handwrite the stuff. I don't know. Whatever works for you, be really accurate with it, because it's very irritating to a host if you've approached them and they say, no, we're not taking anybody until March of next year. And then 2 weeks later, you approach them again. And trust me, I have made that mistake. And it was just because I wasn't organized and I was in between virtual assistants, and it was just crazy making. Once you have things in place, research the right shows, book as many as possible within as short a period of time if you're going to do a tour. That's what a tour really is. I mean, you could do one show a week every week for a year, get 52 shows under your belt. That's not a tour. A tour is where within a week or two, you book show after show after show. And it might be that 3 shows are airing at the same time. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Have a plan in place for marketing the episodes and let the host know that you're going to help them to market. Yeah, who's this? Oh my gosh, it's Lucy. And Lucy, do you want to share a little bit? You can unmute yourself and share a little bit about your experience with podcast shows.
Oh, well, actually, I had a great deal of fun. The research was interesting because I found myself getting really in depth when I took every single step that you gave me. I was able to get 3 out of 5 shows and booked on them, and they were booked like within a few weeks of the time that I did that.
Awesome.
Even now, and I have sort of taken a hiatus from that as I'm learning some other developing some other products and things, that I have gone back and pulled some of those that I did not get before, because they said that they were all booked up for the year.
Right.
And contacted them again, and they've asked me to contact them after the first of the year, tail end of January, beginning of February, so that they can do the booking. So that looks like I've got maybe another handful.
So it could turn out that you're, rather than just a 60% conversion rate, and rather than that's incredible. 60% is really, really good. I mean, if we could get 60% every time we went out to book shows, that would be phenomenal.
Well, I think what's really important is if you listen, if you do that step of listening, and then you're not going to ask somebody who isn't a fit.
Absolutely. And I want people to move closer to your microphone and talk into your microphone in your radio voice. Go ahead. Move closer.
I'm closer.
Okay.
I like to present with...
Okay, I want to stop you there. Listen to how good her sound is. Her sound is so rich. And the reason I'm using the headset from my phone right now is because sometimes the microphone, when I have too many people on the line, it cuts out. And so I didn't want that to happen. But I learned something from Lucy the other day, and it was like, put the microphone in front of your mouth. What a concept. So be very aware of that when you're doing your interviews. It's like, be aware of how it sounds. Some people don't like wearing headsets. You can wear earbuds. That's what Lucy's wearing right now. You don't have to wear a headset, but you should. When I do interviews, here's my earbuds right here. I just plug them into my speaker, and it minimizes the distracting noises. So thank you, Lucy. I appreciate that.
It helps if they remember to breathe.
What's that? No.
I said it helps. Yeah, it helps if they remember to breathe. Yes, definitely remember to breathe. Remember to breathe.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because seriously, a lot of times people get so nervous when they're on a call that they start talking like this, and it's like, stop. And one of the things I do when I coach clients is I actually train them on how to pace themselves and how to do sound bites. And I'll stop them mid-sentence while I'm coaching them and say, okay, stop right there. Now let's tighten that up, because otherwise we get so either fear keeps us talking, or we're so enamored with our own voice. And, some of us, we like to hear ourselves talk. And that's why we like to do podcast shows. But you have to know when to stop, because the audience can only take so much. And the host too, they have to be able to have, it's a conversation. That's really what you're having, is a conversation. So, All right. So market the episodes that you're on. Okay, let's look at how you can market. One way is with a blog post. You can take the episode, do a blog post, and I do that with episodes that I'm on. I just do as much repurposing, and that's the word you want to keep in mind, is repurpose your content. Send it out to your subscriber list, and if you do a lot of interviews, that's why you want to have a media page and a blog tour page, or a podcast tour page, because if you do 50 interviews in a week and you send out 50 messages to your list, you're going to upset a lot of people. If, on the other hand, you send out a daily message and you say, we just added 10 new episodes, and you have it on the page and you have little images and you really make it enticing for people to listen, if they become your fan, they'll spend hours listening to you. Social media, which would be Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of that. Now, the nice thing about Twitter is you can post something every hour, and you could do that all day long if you have a big list. Most people are not going to see it, so you're not going to offend anybody. But here's some of the social media. And a well thought out process will reap you incredible benefits. And, you know, I want to take you back to my book, Message of Hope, in 2002, no profit. My book in 2013, Power Up for Profits, very profitable. And the only difference was not my passion as a writer. The difference was I learned how to market, and I learned it inside out. And I'm still learning things. That's the thing. We will never stop learning. But what's so interesting is as you start branding yourself a certain way and people recognize your name with that brand, what happens is opportunities come out of the woodwork. I was just invited 2 days ago to speak at one of the largest podcast conferences in the world. They bring in thousands of people. And before I said yes, I emailed a few of my friends who I knew had been there, and I said, do you think I should do it? And they're like, oh, do not miss this opportunity. It's a great, great opportunity, not only to network with other experts, but also there are people who will want to use your services. So, you know, that's the nice thing about being on a lot of podcast shows, is people will start recognizing your name with an expertise, with a specialty, with what's down. Where can your fans invest? Okay, this is a repeat of something I put up earlier, but now it might have a different flavor to it. They can buy your books. They can buy your consulting. They can buy your coaching. They can pay you to speak at events. They can, you can put on your own self-staged events. These can be incredibly profitable. I know people, before I hired a coach to really guide me in this, a good event when I first started out was about $1,000. If I made $1,000, I was happy. Then it jumped up to $7,000. Then it jumped up to about $15,000. Then it jumped up to $50,000. And then I hired a coach, and with one idea, I made $100,000, $50,000 more based on her idea. Then I hired her for a year, and she just worked with me, and then I made $250,000. And so there was an investment with her to get that kind of brain power, but it was definitely worth it, because now that's with me for the rest of my life. And it's the same with any of the services you offer. It's like, once you figure out the formula, like getting on podcast shows, it's with you. You know, some people say, I just want to outsource everything. You can do that, but why not learn how to do it so that you know how to guide your team? That's why you want to learn it too. Masterminds are another way that you can make a phenomenal amount of money. Online products. And then speaking engagements. Depending on what level you're at with speaking engagements, you can make an honorarium would be $500 if you're speaking in your own backyard and they say we don't have a budget, and do you have an honorarium? That's $500. Great. And then speaking fees start getting real when you're looking at $1,500 to $2,500, $2,500 to $5,000, $5,000 to $10,000, and you grow into that. It's like, I remember the first time I got paid $500, I was over the moon, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. And I was like, I arrived as a speaker. Well, that was 25 years ago. Things have dramatically changed since that time. So all of these things are revenue streams if you integrate your process. Here's a great example of somebody who made money in spite of herself. She didn't know what she was doing on podcast shows. I've worked with her a few times over the years, and we had a conversation. I said, Gwen, I really think you should join my 100 club. We've got some great people in there, and I think you're going to benefit. And she goes, well, I did do one podcast show. And I said, well, tell me about it. And she goes, well, I can directly relate $8,000 in sales to that one show. And I said, really? And she goes, is that good? And I'm like, oh my gosh, is that good? That's great. And I said, and how many shows have you done since that time? She goes, none. And I'm like, okay. You made $8,000 from the first show you were on. We need to get you on more shows. And she joined the 100 Club. She's a delightful guest. She's kind of like Lana from Montana. The hosts love her. She was easy to book. She just everything worked in her favor. Now, what it is she's a very high-end fine artist. She has very high-end retreats in Santa Fe, New Mexico, or Taos, New Mexico. She has a beautiful home that she brings people into her home and charges a substantial amount for these artists to learn how to market their business. And so she's teaching artists the business of business. And as a result of that, she's able to use podcast shows to drive traffic to her website, to get people to sign up for her thing. She engages them on her list. She invites them to a call. She, from there, retreats, on and on and on. There's a whole process to this. So don't think that you're going to be on a show and all of a sudden people are going to run to your retreats. Some people make the mistake where they try to sell too soon. And what you want to do is you want to nurture the relationship. So foundational aspects. Determine the type of shows that you're going to target. Make sure your website is visitor ready. And by this point, I hope everybody knows what that means. Your marketing materials, such as your expert one sheet, your intro questions, media pitch sheet, all of these are important to have. Be very proactive. One show is not going to make that much of a difference, and one show is not a tour. Do as many shows as possible for a high concentration and lots of Google juice. Send a copy of your book to the host ahead of time. What's interesting about doing a lot of shows also is as you approach more and more shows, the hosts start checking you out. And when they see that you've been on other shows, you're less of a risk to them. It's social proof that you would be a good guest. So you've got to give them social proof. Check your fear at the door. Don't worry about being perfect. Trust me, it's not necessary. Preparation of material, an opt-in on your website. These are the different things that you need. I'm giving you the checklist right now. Engagement messaging, once people opt in, what are you going to say to them? A media pitch sheet. Your bio in various word counts, because a host may say, we need a bio of 100 words. Another host might say, we need a bio of 50 words. If they don't tell you how many words, ask them. When they say, could you send me your bio, I'll say, how many words ideally would you like? That gives me a framework, so because I can send them a 500-word bio and they may cut it down to the first paragraph. So I want to have more control. Headshots should be high resolution. Book cover image, high resolution. And host things on your website. You have a media page with your headshot, your book image, your bio, your media pitch sheet. All of that can be on your website. Challenges that you face. If you're new to this, it may seem intimidating. The time involved to find shows. It does take time. But once you get a rhythm going, and I actually have a media person that books for some of my clients and she books for me. I'm going to be releasing my memoir in a few months, and during that time, we're going to do a virtual podcast tour. We're going to do a blog tour, a podcast tour. It's going to be a big, big tour. And I can't do that by myself. I need a team of people that will help me to get the opportunities. And ideally, you want to get to the point as you do more and more of these that all you need to do is show up and shine and lead people to where you want them to go. And as you grow, you want to budget for a team that can help you to accomplish this. Keep everything in order. Develop all your marketing material. A challenge is not being proactive enough. Fill in your pipeline with fresh leads on an ongoing basis. Again, the more you're out there, the more hosts will hear you. They'll come to you. Once you reach a certain critical mass, last week I did 2 interviews and I didn't approach the host. They approached me. There's been occasions I'll be talking to somebody on the phone, and Lou Bortone did this to me. We were having a conversation. He said, would you mind going on Zoom and let's do an interview right now? And I said, yeah, I showered today. You betcha. That was my response. It's like, I can do it because I actually have makeup on. You betcha. And we did it. I turned on the camera. We were on. We did a short interview, and that was that. And so, you'll have opportunities that just appear out of nowhere. Say yes to them, because those yeses can open up incredible, incredible opportunity. Staying the course. Not that anybody ever gets distracted by squirrels. Ever, ever, ever. Lucy. Planning things out the right way. The big thing is you want
You
to.
told on me.
Yeah, I did. I love that microphone. Oh my God. One day I'm just going to call you and we're going to just do microphone to microphone. We're going to have the microphone jam. And I'll be testing different microphones during it, but really it's about planning out what you want. Now I've got a few examples. I'm going to show you Scandal in the Shadows, what we're doing with Peg, some of the things we're doing, not everything, but finding enough shows, and you want to create several hooks. So let's talk about hooks and angles. You want to think beyond the obvious. A lot of people, they only look at one little thing and they say, that's what I speak on. I only speak on that. I'm not going to speak on anything else. And it's like, God bless you, because you're making life really hard for yourself and anybody who's working with you, because there might be hooks and angles that you didn't think of. Anna gave a great example of what she did. Find authors in your genre and find shows that they've been on. We did this with Lana from Montana, the food codes lady. Phenomenal book. If you haven't gotten it, I recommend you get this. But she actually is a consultant for Bradley Nelson, who does the emotion codes. Bradley had a release, Dr. Brad is what we call him. He had a release of a book about a year ago, 8 months to a year ago, and was on a boatload of podcast shows. So I had a virtual assistant who went out and found every show that they could that he had been on within a certain time period. Then what we did, and here's a little hack that'll help you. Then what we did is we approached all those shows and we said, we're writing on behalf of Lana Nelson, the top consultant for Dr. Bradley Nelson. So we immediately had that connection. We see that you had Dr. Nelson on your show recently, and Lana is one of his top consultants. She also keynotes at his conference, and she also understands the emotion codes, and she wrote the book, The Food Codes. Would you like to have her on your show? We closed about 80% of those people. It was, we hit pay dirt on that one. So if you can find something like that, that's, do you have a question, Lucy? Or you're doing that?
A comment. My very first show was one that Lana had been on. And what I did was, of course, I listened to a couple of others, but I listened to that particular show plus a couple of others and mentioned Lana when I sent my email to him. And then I was in the Hollis Chapman show.
Boom.
Just like that.
Boom. Just like that. Just like that. Good. Thank you for that. Ask your readers. You may have people who have your book who have certain shows that are a favorite of theirs. Ask them what shows they listen to and then say, I surveyed my readers and a lot of them listen to your show. I would love to be on your show. You have to be bold in what you're going to do to make this work. Check iTunes for similar shows. There actually is a training video inside the podcast directory page that shows you how to check out iTunes. I'm not going to go through it right now. Here's another person who she got 4 shows booked really fast going through the training. She applied the formula as is. See, that's the thing. It's kind of like a recipe that there's certain steps to take, and when you do it, you get a better result. So Colleen has done a phenomenal job. She's still doing some podcasting. Just has some amazing stuff coming up. And part of her hook was she rode 300 miles on her bike in a month or something. And then she did some big bike challenge or something. And she's in her 60s. And she's like, this is what I did. And it's like, good branding, good branding. So, okay. So Scandal in the Shadows, Mary Margaret O'Connor. This book is, it's about the secrets that are kept in the Catholic Church around women. And I won't go into a lot of detail on it, but it's a phenomenal, phenomenal book. And here is Margaret Mary's one sheet. Actually, this is her pitch sheet. It's very short, to the point. You'll notice possible interview topics are women's studies, rebellious living, spirituality, truth of Jesus, gender inequality, discrimination, women priests in the early Catholic Church. All of those are possible things she can be interviewed on. We have a very short bio. If they want more information on her, they can go to her website, and the link is active on a PDF file. But the various angles, as I mentioned, the women's studies, rebellious living, spirituality. And when we first started looking at topics, at first it was like, well, maybe it's just the Catholic Church. And she and I brainstormed, and in about 5 minutes, we came up with a whole boatload of topics she can speak on. And the thing you want to do is write as many possible hooks and angles that you can speak on, and then prioritize it. What are the ones that will be the A topics, the B topics, and the C topics? In a pinch, if you have to go after the C topics, go after the C topics. But be watching for the release of this book. It's coming out soon, and she's going to be doing a lot of podcast interviews. Right now, she's getting her whole foundation in place. She's an amazing woman. She doesn't like me saying that, but she is truly an amazing woman. She's a rock star. And very, very, very humble woman, and just a powerhouse. Understated power is who she is. Okay. And then mention the food codes. Here's some of the hooks that Lana is able to use with the food codes. Intuitive eating, dieting, because her book, it's about not dieting at all. And so she can go on shows about dieting and kind of break the myth on that. Nutrition, she's a nutritionist. Authorship, she can talk about what it's like to write a book and market a book. Health coaching, women's health, food and emotions. Those are just some of the topics that she can speak on. So the process in a nutshell, I want to go through the process again in a nutshell. Research shows that fit your expertise. Prepare all marketing materials such as the expert one sheet, bio, media outreach letter. Your on-air introduction, questions, and high-resolution photos. Reach out to the host. And this, we'll have the replay on this, so I'll make sure that you get it. Book an interview. Send out all required information to the show host. Clarify the format of the show. Find out, is it video or audio? Is it live or recorded? And I thought that I knew when the show that I went on that was live, I thought I knew it was recorded, and it obviously wasn't. But be prepared, even if you think it's audio, be prepared that it might be video. So don't go on with your hair a mess, no makeup if you wear makeup. Be ready, camera ready. Request, I actually did an interview recently where the host wanted to be on video even though it was an audio show. And thank goodness I had freshened up before, because I go to the gym and I go running in the morning. So until I get in my office, trust me, I've got a baseball cap on or a beanie cap on, and I am not camera ready. And so fortunately, I showered and I was ready, and he said, this is going to be audio only, but I'd like to be on video just so we can connect at a deeper level. It's like, okay, that works for me. Request all access details. Is it going to be by phone? Is it going to be by Zoom? Is it going to be by Skype? Test all of that ahead of time. And add all details to your interview spreadsheet. Send a reminder to the host and client. That's for a virtual assistant. They send a reminder to our client 48 hours before the interview. Ask for the replay link after the show goes live. Promote on various social media channels. Add the show permalink to your website media page. Okay, here's another gentleman. He was actually a priest for 20 years. He became a alcohol and drug counselor. Met the woman he fell in love with. They've been married for 30 years, so he's an ex-priest. That's part of his story. He's now he deals with the emotional intelligence, and he works within corporations. He had a lot of success with the 100 Club also. Other considerations: your sounds around you. Are there dogs barking? Are there, like today, I didn't know if we were going to be able to do this with the storm that we had earlier today. It was really bad, and I thought it might shut down my electricity. What are the visuals behind you? If you'll notice my backdrop here, that's exactly what it is. Take a look here. I want to show you. It's a backdrop. I got it off of Amazon. It's $18, and I can change it out. I can put a barn door behind me. I can put a brick wall behind me. I can put whatever I want. Avoid a lot of clutter behind you if you're doing video, because if you have a lot of clutter, people are looking at the clutter. And if you have books behind you, be strategic about the kind of books you put. Like if you're a success coach and you have a book on success, put books that support that genre. And definitely have your book behind you. Get a backdrop if you need to. Your interview capabilities. Are you able to do a good interview? Your comfort level with interviews. And are you aware of how you are driving traffic? In other words, are you dropping seeds every so often and saying, yeah, in my book, the one thing I loved about I'll pretend I'm Lana, when I wrote the food codes, was when we talked about how to ban excuses for not cooking, because a lot of people, they won't cook and da-da-da-da-da. So here I'm talking about banning cooking. I say it's in my book, The Food Codes, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Stories that inspire. It can't be all facts and figures. You have to have stories. So, ready for the next level? Let's talk about working together. And I said I'm not going to sell you anything, and I'm not. I have a process that if anybody wants to have a conversation about possibly working together, you must fill out a questionnaire. Unless you've been a client before. If you've been a client before, you don't need to. But I'm talking about if you have the directory and we've never worked together, there's a questionnaire. It's a very simple 10-question questionnaire. You return it to me. You receive a scheduling link based on your answers. If you give incomplete answers, or I really don't feel that I can help you, I'll let you know. I've turned down quite a few people for the 6-month program because I really don't feel they're ready for it. I don't feel I can help them. We have a conversation to determine if us working together is a great idea, and only bona fide experts who are ready to invest and move forward. There is definitely an investment. And so if you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, if you're 18 years old and you call yourself a life coach, probably I can't help you. And so that's where you'll find out information about the 6-month program, but here's what the questionnaire looks like. And all you need to do is go to powerupforprofits.com/100. And that's where the questionnaire is. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to